Good morning, USITT! All right, that was pretty good. I'm here. My name's Dave Will, and I'm Vice President for Conferences. And I have a great pleasure to lead this morning's session here and welcome you to Fort Worth, Texas. Now, I want all of you to raise your hand for all of those people that were here 20 years ago. Okay, all 10 of us came back. Well, I was here 20 years ago. It was my first year on the conference committee, and this is my last year on the conference committee, and it's an honor to have brought the conference back here to Fort Worth. Matter of fact, my legacy as Vice President for Conferences is to have taken us back to places that we've been. Long Beach, California. Milwaukee, Wisconsin. In Fort Worth, where it is warmer than it was in both of those cities. And I promise you that they guarantee that it's only going to rain today. The rest of the week, get out those bathing suits. So in this great return here, one of the things that I tried to do as Vice President for Conferences was to try and involve both the local, regional members in our planning as well as the sections. And this particular year, not only does those 20 years mean something here, but I have to single out 3 people that have been instrumental from the region that have really done marvelous work for us. And the first one is Leilani Lehman, and she's sitting down here, and I don't have a follow spot, but you could find her. Leilani was the chair of this conference 20 years ago when it was here in Fort Worth in regional programming. And then she was assisted by Jack Hagler at that time, which you're going to meet in just one second. And then Mary Montalvo. And Mary has done yeoman's work as she has been relocated to Fort Worth just 5 years after a long stint in Phoenix and a long-time member. And you all stop in the office in 102 and say, hey to Mary all week long, because she just loves the foot traffic. And she's backstage laughing, I heard that. Okay, the last thing of business is this right here, and I know most of the younger folks won't recognize it, is a cell phone. I told you 5 years ago technology wasn't my forte, and it hasn't gotten too much better. But anyways, I'd just like to ask you to all take and silence those things right now, put them on vibrate, turn them off, doesn't matter, because we have a tremendous morning here to honor some people and hear a tremendous keynote speech. And so to move us along, I have the pleasure of introducing a friend of mine that I met about 25 years ago working on a project by the name of Jack Hagler. And Jack is going to come up here today and introduce our keynote speaker. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jack Hagler. I'm with Schuler Shook Theater Planners from Dallas, but also from Fort Worth. About 2 years ago, Texas Tech invited 4 alumni back to Lubbock to come to a distinguished alumni gathering. And I was one of those who flew out to Lubbock, and I was met at the airport, and they immediately took us to lunch to meet the other honorees. Because we didn't know each other, I knew one other person, and they were all older than me, and we needed to bond. So we went to Taco Villa, and we had lunch together at Taco Villa, and all of the stories started going about our college days and things that happened. And since I knew one of the guys, I thought, these are probably true stories. And I also thought, damn, you guys are lucky to be alive after all that. And one of the storytellers, the best one there, was Jaston Williams, who I'm very happy to call a friend now. And Jaston Williams is our keynote speaker today, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about Jaston's accomplishments. He's been working in professional theater for over 40 years as the author and performer of the Tuna series, A Greater Tuna, A Tuna Christmas, Red, White, and Tuna Does Vegas. Jaston's been on the road 32 years with the Tuna plays. He's played Broadway, Kennedy Center, Ford's Theater, the Alliance Theater, the Alley Theater, Pasadena Playhouse, the Kern Theater in San Francisco, and many, many more venues with Tunas. Jaston is the author of solo shows including I'm Not Lying, Blame It on Valentine, Texas, Camping with Gasoline, and the upcoming Maid Marian in a Stolen Car. In the past few years, he's appeared in the critically acclaimed productions of Laramie Project, Our Town, and True at the Zach Theater in Austin. Jaston has performed 2 command performances at the White House. He's won both the Los Angeles and the San Francisco Bay Area Theater Critics Awards and the B. Ida Payne and Austin Theater Critics Circle Award. Jaston has received 4 nominations for Best Actor in Washington, D.C.'s Helen Hayes Awards. He's received the Texas Governor's Award for Outstanding Contributions to the Arts by a Native Texan, which I'm a native Texan too, and most recently the Texas Medal of the Arts Awards. Jaston is very proud to be associated with the theater department at Texas Tech University as a guest artist in their playwriting program. He currently lives in the Austin area with his partner, Dr. Kevin Mooney, and with their wonderful son, Song Williams. Please welcome my friend, Jaston Williams.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you. Thank you. You know, after this career as an actor that has somehow slogged on for over 40 years, I really feel the need today to address this assembly of distinguished and indispensable colleagues. And I need to convey a message from my side of the aisle for all of the actors and writers and composers and dancers and directors, to all of you who make our world happen. And what I need to say to you from all of them is, I'm so sorry. Oh God. I am just so sorry for all of us, because my people basically have the social skills that are found one rung lower on the food chain than those of Vladimir Putin's meaner little brother. We are not a stable group under the very best of circumstances, and you people get to experience us at our absolute worst. And I tried to explain this to a friend of mine who is she is a very accomplished counselor for behavioral counselor, and who deals with a lot of people with addictive behavior. And her take on it is that everybody's addicted. And I told her, I said, I think you're addicted too. You're addicted to recovery, but that's not that bad. But that she really believes that everybody's addicted to something, and that the way to deal with this for everybody is either a 12-step program or group therapy. And she's tried for years to persuade me in this direction. And then finally I told her, I said, April, I love you, but I just have to tell you that I cannot imagine anything that I would hate more than sitting in a circle with people I do not know and working it all out, because I'm from show business. I deal with neurotic personalities in spades. Why in the hell would I seek out strangers in the same condition but with less flair? Allow me to offer a few examples. I know a producer who made an absolute fortune off of a show who was so cheap that when it came time to take new photos for the press, he saved money by hiring a blind photographer. And I asked my beloved friend Larry Randolph how the photos came out, and he said, well, frankly, they were a little blurry. I worked with an actor who was late for rehearsal one night in Atlanta because he had shot and killed someone in the parking lot at the Winn-Dixie, and he got off. I was in a production of Our Town, one of the most brilliant plays ever written in the English language, and the director decided that she just couldn't bear that Emily died at the end, so she didn't. Emily frickin' lived. I know a director whose approach to artistic differences could get very near to a felony, and who had to be removed from rehearsal in handcuffs twice. I know a producer whose lying was so pathological that he found himself engaged to several women at the same time. So we shipped him off to this place for help that we lovingly and jokingly called the Liar Clinic, but he only lasted 2 weeks. They threw him out for lying. I worked with an actress who had a minor breakdown when another performer squashed a cockroach underfoot. Now, the upset actress said that she had been communicating with this cockroach and that they had known each other in another life. I always wondered if the bug was saying, "What the hell happened to you?" I know an actor who would hide food in props and costumes, and who constantly complained that the dry cleaning was shrinking his wardrobe. One dresser finally got enough of it and stormed out of the dressing room and screamed, "I am big, it's the costumes that got small." I know a director who pulled a toy gun on an actress when she insulted a costumer. Yes, this guy threatened an actress with a toy gun. Oops, that was me. So in short, you guys put up with a lot. And one thing I've always loved about the technicians that I've known is that I tend to get a lot closer to you people than I do actors and directors in the long run. The people in this business that I count as my dearest friends and confidants tend to be on the technical side of the artistic process. And the thing I do also love about technicians is that when the opportunity presents itself, you're not shy about just getting in on the fun. Now, some will poo-poo this idea that such playfulness constitutes a breach of decorum, an unhealthy commingling of the disciplines, a blemish on the porcelain pigment of union etiquette and solidarity. And I would just respond, and you have a problem with that? My favorite experience in this realm or regard happened in a theater where I worked for many years when I was on tour, a venue that should remain nameless. But this crew immediately established their confidence early on, and they never missed a cue by the slightest fraction. And the camaraderie between the house crew and our people was instantaneous. And one Friday night, a very charming and gregarious stagehand was talking to me, and he said, well, you know, tomorrow night's Saturday night, and that's commando night. Well, folks, I kind of came of age in the 1970s, so I'm real bad about upping the ante. And so I said, well, how can we determine if you're not wearing underwear if you're still clothed? And at that moment, the train left the station. The next night, as I made my exit after the first scene, I couldn't help but notice that a stagehand who was manipulating a pulley that brought Christmas trees on and off the stage was naked. From the waist down. I didn't have time to respond in kind because I had a very quick change, but after my next exit, I stripped off completely like a plucked chicken and made my long backstage cross, skipping like a little girl. The next time I came off stage, I noticed that 2 dressers were completely nude. And not long after that, the properties master went native and bent over to pick up a Christmas ornament. And considering the angle, that's an image that will be with me till they put the coins on my eyes. After intermission, it was hard not to notice that our stage manager was sitting at his podium calling cues wearing nothing but a headset. A few minutes later, we looked off stage left and saw 3 sets of bare women's breasts lined up like chickens in a coop, belonging to the wardrobe mistress, the general manager, and the lighting assistant. Later in the play, we had a big special effect. There was a character named R.R. Snavely in the tuna plays who always saw UFOs. And there was this huge, heavy, massive UFO ramp that would come down from the wings, and it took about 8 guys on pulleys and ropes to maneuver this thing into place. The ramp went down, RR went up it, and disappeared into a phalanx of naked union stagehands. Folks, this was not your mother's brigadoon. So as traditions will exert themselves, whenever we came back to this theater, Commando Night was just part of the schedule. And, you know, there are some of you out there who may have trained in religious or very conservative institutions that may find this shocking, but I just have to tell you, being on the road can get very, very boring. And this crew was excellent at their work. Their timing was impeccable, and they were never a hair off. And considering the situation, that's more than just a manner of speech. So 2 years later, Commando Night played itself out, and actually a couple of people from the front office came down and got disrobed backstage. And this was the year that we proved that a 200-pound plus union stagehand could operate a fly rail wearing high heels and a long flowing evening gown. And 2 years later, we came back. And on the first night, everyone was wondering what was going to come down or come off. By the weekend, But as fate would have it, I was not to be back on stage until the weekend because that night there was a horrific automobile accident back in Texas that claimed 3 lives, and one of them was my first son. And so what happened was a week of unpracticed numbness, of wise ministers, of grieving mothers, of bugles and rifles and folded flags. And I never thought about the show until that was all over. And then I desperately needed to be back with my theater family. So I got on the plane, I went back, and I think part of this was a need on my part to put myself in front of an audience, because I knew that for that measure of time where we performed an act, I had to let my grief disappear. I had to do my job. I had to start practicing in small increments of time, not grieving, but working, returning to my art, returning to my family, returning to my friends. And the stage manager dropped by my dressing room that night and said that they needed to do a sound check on stage. So I went on, and while I was waiting, I heard some commotion in the wings, and I looked over, and everyone was looking up. So I looked up, and I saw 3 completely naked union stagehands being lowered from the rafters on a batten. And for the first time in a week, I smiled and I laughed. And just as this address began with an apology, I believe it should conclude with an expression of thanks. For that which best describes you is summed up in the word indispensable. For me, you people built a bridge that literally spanned from Elsinore to Tuna, Texas, and beyond. And you illuminated every step of my path. I want to thank you for my first visit to Venice, which I experienced from the 10th row of the Richard Rodgers Theater, watching the musical Nine and trembling as I saw a single dancer pole an invisible gondola past a wall of reflected water which was actually light. I want to thank you for revealing Elizabeth the Queen and Mary of Scotland, as they must have been, because a costumer was a genius at the art of cutting cloth. I want to thank the lighting designer, David Nancaro, who, when a comic bit wasn't working at the end of an act, and he said, you know, I think every time Vera uses her cell phone, the plane should just go to black. The critics praised our comic genius, but it was the lighting that garnered the best laugh of the night. I want to thank Marcia Hardy, the technical director, who dealt with a pompous set designer who said, well, I doubt you can leg and build 27 raked platforms before opening. Well, 2 days later, that entire set was up and functional and allowed me weeks of rehearsal time. Some said that my character of Puck seemed almost airborne. Well, thank you, Marcia. Thank you, Marcia, for granting me the time I needed to learn to fly. I want to thank Linda Fisher, the costumer for Greater Tuna, for the footwear you designed for me when I was playing a pre-adolescent character. The narrow soles you placed on my boots gave me that perfect, wobbly, ankled walk that convinced an audience that it was an actor doing the work, when it was actually the boots. I want to thank you to Susan Sampliner, the company manager who shoveled a path through thigh-high snow in the alley next to the circle in the square so that I could run back and forth during quick changes. I want to thank the dressers, August, Mickey, Sam, and Michael, also known as Maxie Bovine, Verbena Brochure, Shelley Jean Palvador, and Safanda Peters. These boys kept everybody laughing for tour after tour after tour, even as their T-cell counts approached zero. I want to thank everyone who taped a mustache or straightened a collar or handled a shoehorn, to those that checked the ticket stubs and gave the heave-ho to a rowdy drunk. I want to thank Karen and Richard and Tish, whose perfection at their work pales next to the exquisite nature of their friendship. And most of all, to all the guys on that crew that couldn't keep their clothes on. You know, during that devastating week, when I suffered this unimaginable loss, our strike fell on New Year's Eve, which spookily had been a somewhat sacred time for me and my son. It was a time we always spent together, if at all possible. And you know, now I like to think that my boy and I literally needed that sound that resonated when we sent our rockets flying skyward. The booms assured both of us that despite the distance and separation we had lived with, our connection was so significant that quietness didn't dignify it to our liking. Ours was a love both playful and fierce and deserved an explosive marker. On that New Year's Eve without him, that very first one, a couple of members of the crew took me out into the alley alongside the theater, and they reached into a paper bag and they removed a dozen or so bottle rockets, and we set them off. And I felt something I couldn't have imagined during that terrible week. I felt lucky. One might have expected that I would cry, but there was no chance of that. The little rockets seemed to be breaking a membrane or winding a clock that had run down from mere fatigue. And each rising rocket with its whiz and pop, whiz and pop, whiz and pop. That wasn't a totem of nostalgia, but a whiz and a pop that painted a filament and a dot on the darkened sky, like exclamation marks in the night. And that's what they were. Exclamation marks for my charmed life. Thank you.